Hey, 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 here we are. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us here at the DevOps Lounge stream. We are on, what's the date? September 22nd. Here we are. It's a Wednesday. It's another stream, and it's another opportunity for me to go over a few questions that I found on Reddit, which I think are really, really interesting questions. So I'm going to crack on. Looks like everyone's doing well. Welcome to the stream link. Thanks for popping in. We're going to get cracking on here with a few questions. I've got 3 in total that I think are quite interesting, actually. Quite interesting questions indeed. And I think that there'll be interesting topics to cover, and I think they'll be applicable to a lot of people in the community and watching the channel. So let's pop on over to the browser here. So this is the first question that I saw recently. So it's Xero to DevOps, is it possible? So this gentleman's essentially, I think just from the question alone, he's saying that he has zero experience, and then he wants to know if he can move into a DevOps based role. This is pretty common. So that you get people who look at the industry and they want to enter the industry, but they don't have any computer science experience, or they don't have any cloud experience or anything like that, but they want to move into the industry, which makes perfect sense. Can it be done? Yeah, absolutely, it can be done. I have an apprentice in France at the moment who I have taken from almost no computer skills up to extremely close now to passing their associate architect exam for AWS. They've got Terraform experience now. They've built out a enterprise grade, highly available WordPress solution in Terraform, using Terraform and Ansible as well. They're using Git, they're using version control, and they're building that out inside of AWS, including a CloudFront distribution as well. And that's a pretty complex concept. So can you go from Xero to DevOps? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Let me know what you think in the comments below as to whether or not you believe that you can go from Xero to DevOps. I think anyone can, personally myself. My personal opinion is you can, but what I would say as a caveat is you've got to be essentially interested in it. It shouldn't be seen as an avenue to make money or a lot of money, or just basically be, you know, how do I increase my paycheck? Oh, well, this DevOps looks, I mean, look at the job listings, the wage is crazy. I don't think that that's the right approach to take, because you'll always essentially live a life of sort of resentment, really, because you're not really doing the thing that you're enjoying. You're just chasing money. So I think that that's definitely the wrong reason to go into it. And I think that if you do approach the industry in that way, and then you do get into the industry with the intention of just sort of drawing the largest paycheck that you can find, that's going to come through in your work as well. And it's going to come through in your attitude and your communication with your colleagues as you move between organizations. So I don't think that that's going to be healthy for you. And I don't think it's going to be healthy for other people in the industry as well. So I do think it can be done, but just needs to be done for the right reasons. Now, how would you go about doing it? So there's the DevOps roadmap as well. I can bring that up here. So it's the DevOps roadmap. So we've got this roadmap.sh DevOps, and then we've got this roadmap here that you can follow. Now, this is pretty complicated. I'm currently working on my own roadmap, which sort of takes away a lot of these choices, because I actually think that there's too many choices here, as odd as that sounds. But this is a good starting point, sort of learning a programming language, learning how an operating system works, learning about managing servers, networking, automation, infrastructure as code, and so on and so forth. So where do you start? I would say personally, look at understanding how an operating system works and how a computer just generally works. Then I would say look at how networking works. And then I would say learn a programming language such as Python, and learn to create software that controls that computer and communicates over that network. That's a good starting point. You can find lots of resources on YouTube completely free of charge. I would start free of charge. In fact, I would start with YouTube. I would look at guides online, simply because if you start spending money on this stuff and then you find you don't like it, you've lost some money. Whereas if you just use something free on YouTube, and then you're 3 months into your studies and you're kind of like, I just don't get this, or I don't think I'm going to enjoy this, or I'm frustrated by this, then it's not really cost you anything except time. And that is that is actually a really good use of your time, is learning how to develop yourself and actually seeing if this is something that you want to do. So that would be a good investment of time, but not necessarily a good investment of money. So is it possible? It absolutely is, yeah. Let's see what the comments are saying here. So with a maths background, I'd suggest taking a wider lens. You might find software engineering suits you well, or you might find data science and machine learning interesting. Be careful with job titles, especially DevOps today, as it's essentially been co-opted to mean sysadmin, which this subreddit tends to confirm. That's very true. You're sort of saying, I want to go from Xero to DevOps, but what does DevOps actually look like, really? I obviously very clearly have my understanding of what DevOps is, but what the industry thinks and the market thinks DevOps is can be different. So you got to be very careful there. And I do like that this user has actually said, you've obviously got a maths-based background, and the original poster does have a maths-based background. And so he's suggesting things like data science and machine learning, and that's true. They may actually be better options for the original poster. We've got let's close that top comment there. We've got data science is like insane money. Your maths background plus Python, and you're golden. I don't really know much about data science. I'd imagine I know that data is really important. We are in the data age at the moment, and so we're in the information age. So yeah, that's potentially very true, but I don't really know much about that. I think anything in programming and data is probably going to be, not necessarily data science. I think it's going to be quite financially beneficial. But I would say it is possible. You can do it. You can get into it. The first thing I would do is assess whether you're going to even enjoy it first. So I would spend probably about a month just sort of looking at the role, looking at systems administration, automation, programming, working in that space, finding interviews online, technical, doing a bit of programming exercises, and just trying to determine whether you enjoy it. Because if you go into it not enjoying it, you're going to really resent it. And again, that's going to come through in your work as well. So Xero to DevOps, is it possible? Yes, but just approach it with as little financial investment as possible and determine if you're going to actually enjoy it first. That's my two takes on that. Let's have a look. Mushroom says, laughing my ass off, it was like this question was made for me. Oh, so you're starting from the beginning then, I assume then? You're starting from scratch. Link, I agree with that. Michael said about reasons for doing DevOps. Cool. Thanks, Link. Yeah, I think it's very important that you actually want to do this rather than, you just see the money. And I think that this person, this original poster is smart enough to know that it's not just about the money. I need to do something that I'm going to enjoy. Oh, wow, you're 14 years old and you're trying to get into DevOps. You've got to just slow down a bit. Maybe just enjoy your life first. Enjoy being a teenager. Tell you now, once it's gone, you're going to miss it. Promise you that. I'm 37. Trust me on this one. All right, let's see what else we've got here. All right. So this was another question that I really liked the sound of and the look of, is can I use an AWS certification alone to get hired? Short and sweet. Is it possible to get hired to work remotely with just an AWS certificate? I think that's a good question. I'm going to upvote that. We're going to come down here. We've got a few responses, obviously. What's my opinion on this? Can you use an AWS certification alone to get hired? I think that you can. And I think that this is actually one of the key benefits of certification is you go, look, I don't have any commercial experience. I've never worked in the industry. However, I have taken the time to study and pass this certification. And when it's something like an AWS Associate Architect, or even if you're really sort of talented or just really smart or just really driven and you get the Pro certification, because that's such a well-known certification, an employer can look at that and they know what it is that you've passed. They understand the obstacles that you've had to overcome in order to essentially pass that certification. They know for a fact that you've had to build out an environment. You have to understand IAM, EC2, S3, RDS, all these core services, all these little gotchas and tricks, all these little sort of fiddly bits about those services. They're putting scenarios in front of you and you're correctly identifying the correct solution for the customer based on the requirements, based on the question. And you've gone ahead and studied for that and then passed it. So when you've got no experience, certification can actually be a really good way of saying, okay, I don't have any experience, but I have met this benchmark. as verified by AWS as a vendor, and you as an employer want someone that can do AWS. And I'm saying to you, based on certification, that I can do that. So that's a really great way of getting a junior role. Now, there is a sort of one little thing I want to touch on here. This poster has asked, is it possible to get hired to work remotely? I would say that given this current situation with the pandemic, with COVID-19, obviously things have changed with regards to going into the office space. People are now working remotely, and more people are actually demanding that you work remotely. So 3 years ago, I might have said that would be really difficult. But today, I think that it would be much more possible to say, I'm a junior, I don't have experience, I've met this benchmark, I want to work remotely. And I think that as more people work remotely, more employers are now seeing that they can actually access a larger pool of specialists in particular fields now, because they're working from home. They've got a great camera, they've got a microphone, they can operate from a home environment in a professional manner. And so now they can actually tap into the market. So I would say yes, I would say that the opportunity right now to get remote working is quite high. So I don't think there's anything about these two particular, there's essentially almost two questions. Is can I get hired with just this AWS certificate? And do you think I can get hired remotely? And I think the answer to both of these is yes. I would say get the certificate, study for it, get the certificate. I would say set up a GitHub account, start creating some code. Even if obviously I'm a hardcore Terraform fan, anyone who watches the streams, watches my channel, it's on the Discord server, chat.learndevops.com.au. Anyone there will tell you that I'm a hardcore Terraform fan. But even if you do an AWS certification and you write a public GitHub repository that contains lots of CloudFormation, that starts building all of these common sort of stacks in there for you, go to an employer with a very well-written cover letter and a really very simple, clean CV, a good LinkedIn profile, the certification. Don't forget to include the validation link on your LinkedIn so they can click that and see that it's valid, and your GitHub repository, and say, this is what I'm capable of doing at this current state, at this current time and date. This is what I can do. I think that that is more than sufficient to get a junior position remotely. In most countries, I would say. Yeah, I don't think you're going to have an issue. It's going to be harder because you are going to be up against people who are going to have some experience. You're going to be up against people who have maybe certification and experience. And so if they can get someone with experience for the same price, you're going to be up against a lot of competition. However, I would say it's definitely possible. Yeah. Good question. Let's have a look to see what other people are saying. It depends which certification and how well you can sell yourself on the skills and knowledge you have acquired through doing the certifications. AWS IQ is a freelance service which allows certified AWS users to showcase their certifications and work with companies on projects. That's correct. Yeah, AWS IQ is somewhere where you go and you register, and then companies can approach you to do work, and it's all sort of verified via AWS. They can profile you and say, this person, we know this person has passed these certifications and can do these things. But I also agree with that first point there. It depends which certification and how well you can sell yourself. That's true. You've got to be confident in your ability to say things like, I don't know the answer to that, but I can go and find the answer because I'm willing to learn, and I can understand things, and I can read documentation, and I understand fundamentals, and so on and so forth. So you've also got to be able to communicate and sell yourself. That pretty much applies anywhere, really, not just IT. That's pretty much any job, even whether you're going to work as a barista. I mean, that's what you've got to do. If you're going to go work cleaning toilets, you've still got to be able to sell yourself versus the next person that wants that job too. So that's an interesting comment. I agree. Some people, okay, so we've got someone who disagrees here. Not really. It's mostly meant to augment our existing career history. I would suggest building up a portfolio on GitHub of some CDK and or CloudFormation solutions and so on and so forth. So I would disagree with that, but also agree with the concept of having a portfolio piece. I think that saying that it augments an existing career history, I wouldn't say that that's accurate. It's actually the complete opposite. I'll tell you a story. When I did my CCNA, or CCENT back in the day, many, many years ago now, the guy that was running the test center had done his CCIE 10 years prior and never ever renewed it. And when I asked him why, he said, because you just simply don't need it. I did the CCIE, it got me the high paying jobs, and then he was done. That was it. You never ever needed it again. I've been in the industry for years, and I did my AWS Associates exam 6 years ago, 5, 6, maybe 7 years ago now, and I've never ever renewed it. No one's ever asked me about certification at all. No one's asked me if I've got a degree. No one's asked me if I've even finished school. They just look at your history, they ask you questions, and then you either get the job or you don't. When you're first coming into the industry, certifications are, quite frankly, they're your bread and butter. You will need them. So I sort of disagree with what this person's saying here. Let's have a look. This person's also saying, no, the cert alone will not get you the job. Again, I do disagree with that. Just getting a certificate is not the criteria to get hired. A lot of people are actually disagreeing. I think a certificate is perfectly good way of getting noticed and putting yourself above the crowd. Let's have a look. I got one and felt it wasn't enough. I agree. It's definitely not enough. A portfolio set is definitely something that's quite important. No. A lot of people are actually saying, no. Hi, it depends. Do you have experience in dev to back that certificate? Well, I mean, no, they've clearly said that they don't. Certificates are great to learn and deep dive, but you need some experience and definitely need to have hungry eyes. I think the hungry eyes is a good one there. Sort of like you've got to be looking around and learning things. But again, the person is, you can't, I mean, you've got to, it doesn't really make sense because you've got to sort of have experience. You've got to sort of get a job to get experience. So this doesn't really make too much sense to me. I recently posted a YouTube video about it, so I might check that video out actually. Pop that up over here, move that over into another browser window. All right, pause that. Let's go down here. Yes, please, that would be very helpful. Oh, that's the thing. My apologies. Not really. A lot of people disagreeing, but honestly, I think it can, and I think I've seen it. So I mean, I don't understand why many people would disagree. But yeah, that's just my thought. How do you feel? Oh, I'm not sure. Oh, am I not sharing my screen? I thought it was.
There you go.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's embarrassing.
Haha. The guy showed up.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate that.
Listen, sorry, I have to leave. I don't mean to interrupt. What is this?
What is what, sorry?
Sorry, what's the topic?
Oh, this is just me doing a stream. So I just generally don't have anyone on the stream, and I just talked about questions basically. So the format's changed a bit there. Thanks for that, Brandon. Okay. All right. I'm going to do this question again then. Do you want me to do the question again? Let's have a look. How vigorous will it be first DevOps? How vigorous will it be for the first DevOps position? I understand it depends on the job responsibility, but can you share your experience? How vigorous will it be? Can you, ADV, can you expand on what you mean in terms of, do you mean in terms of getting your first job? Like how hard would it be? So Dan, okay, I honestly must disagree. I literally just spoke with someone who had the high-level architect but never deployed services. All theoretical and passed the tests. Can be good, but is meant to very little to some folks. If you're applying for a junior role, it might mean more, but I've met more mid to senior level folks with cert who couldn't do anything with the knowledge from their cert. Learning how to approach problems critically is more important than having the cert, in my opinion. What I would say is, I would say that having the certificate shows that you can essentially meet a certain benchmark. And so especially like government and enterprises, they're the sort of types of organizations that are very cert heavy. And they're the kind of organizations who can actually afford to take on juniors. So a startup is very cash poor. And so they tend to need people to be running really, really quickly, which is why startup wages tend to be very high. Because they know they need to be hiring people who can do the job. And people who can do the job don't need to validate that they can do the job with certification. But people coming into the industry, I mean, ultimately, like I disagree with going to university and doing computer science, unless you want to be a computer scientist or an academic. If you want to go into the industry and be a programmer, I would not suggest going to university at all. I would suggest going out and building a portfolio of software, talking to people, networking, applying to jobs, and in an interview saying, I know I don't have any experience, but here's 6 applications that I've written. They're all small utilities, but it showcases my back-end skills, my front-end skills, both, whatever. And having a portfolio piece is definitely way more powerful. But I think that whilst you're building a portfolio piece, If you do a certificate at the same time, then you're just sort of knocking two bottles down with one stone, because the certificate will teach you things that you can then use to build a portfolio piece. And so having certification, given that it can be pretty cheap, like if you look at Adrian Cantrell, I think his name is, his AWS Associates course is like $40, and it's a complete course. It's very, very highly recommended. Tens of thousands of students, very, very easy to go through. And that's actually, you'll end up coming out the end of that with a CloudFormation portfolio. So you'll end up coming out of that with all the knowledge you need to pass the cert, and you'll end up with a big portfolio piece that you can then use in interviews to then say, this is what I can do. Because you've got to remember that this person is saying, can I use my AWS certification alone to get hired? So they're effectively saying, I don't really have any experience. So they can't go into an interview with experience. They have to use every piece of ammunition that they have in order to hit the target. And so I believe that certification is going to help them do that. But that being said, there are still caveats to that. So I got into technical, yes, I got to tech in a similar age a few years back. Definitely can do it. Nice. Let's have a look. I think it's clear without the screen. I don't think you need to recover it. Okay, Link, thank you. Okay, I got through posting my certification on Red Hat. Okay, now, so I have my internship right now with a company where they are helping me get some hands-on experience. I got it through posting my certification on Reddit. That's awesome. Yeah, so I actually have a story regarding my very first job. So how did I get my first job at Comtech in the UK? So what I actually did was I applied for the role and I sent them my CV. And my CV basically said, this guy has no experience. So, and no certifications actually. And so I sent in the CV and my boss essentially looked at it and just threw it to the side. Then a day later, I actually ended up replying to a Linux user group mailing list posting in the area where the job actually was. And I was telling someone how to compile a audio driver for the kernel. And Ian, the boss at that place, saw the post and was like, I recognize that name. I actually really, really recognize that name. What's that name about? What's that name about? And then he sort of thought about it for a while, and then he went through the CVs again, and he saw the CV and was like, And so that got me the interview. And then in the interview, once we were about 20, 30 minutes in, he basically said, you actually know more than most of the Red Hat certified people that have come through this job so far. And so in the end, I ended up getting the job. Over people who actually had certification and experience. It could have been that I also lowballed them a little bit, so I took a bit of a pay hit to get that. Obviously, that worked out financially. That was a great investment. However, I was able to get a job without certification. So I would say that certification and going into the interview and wowing the manager as well would have just further improved my chances. But also it sort of contradicts what I'm saying in that I got it without the certification. So I think that, in my opinion, if you can get certification, that I would say get the certification. If you could afford it, you've got the time, I would say get it personally. Some people are typing really, really quickly there. I didn't have my screen on for the first question as well. That's going to be silly. All right. What I'll do is we'll continue to stream, and then I'll do some professional videos. I'll record some professional videos for those other questions so they go up, so they don't get missed. And then they'll go up on the YouTube channel. So Carl, who's not here at the moment, we'll edit them up and we'll put them on YouTube for you guys. But I really appreciate the numbers we got turned out here. Some amazing numbers here. And I really do appreciate the feedback as well. Dan says, I only been certified for Ubiquity, point-to-point, no cloud or anything. If you're earlier in your career, it might be worth it, but later on, I just don't think it's worth it. Now that's something I agree with, Dan. I think when you get into your career and you're established, I just think certifications can be pretty much just a no-go. Just ignore them. Like, really, honestly, unless it's a compliance thing, like say, for example, you want to work for the federal government. So I can't work for the federal government in Australia because I don't have my citizenship yet. Some jobs I can, some I can't. Eventually I'll get my citizenship. So that's almost like sort of a form of certifications. I can be security vetted, right? But there may even be more than that. They may even turn around and say, we can't let you touch sensitive systems unless you've got your Red Hat certified engineer or unless you're AWS Pro Architect. It's just a compliance thing. It's just an insurance thing, whatever. So, but I would say 90% of jobs, that's not going to be the case. That's probably actually quite rare. Most jobs just aren't going to need certification once you've got your foot in the door, actually. I don't know if you guys agree. Dan, Ninja, what do you reckon? Do you think once your foot's essential? So let's say you've just landed a job, you're on your first day, and you pass your, say, 6-month probation. I would say at that point, you're pretty much good. I'd say at that point, you're pretty much good.
Most companies, it's like, what, 90 days, 120 days? So
pretty much. I agree entirely. Go for it, Dan. Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, that was right. I've essentially changed the format to not be like a Q&A. I wanted it to be structured. The main reason is that it's going on to, even though I'm not going to monetize the YouTube channel, it's going to go onto the YouTube channel and go public. And so I was really sort of concerned that people would be like, oh, hang on, I didn't give permission for that. I know you're okay with that, but like if someone else jumps on, that's new to the service. Like, hey, can I talk? And I know that they're trustworthy, and I get them on, and then all of a sudden they're on YouTube and they're saying things like, "Oh, my name's John, and I work for Google, and I'm saying this," and it's like all of a sudden his opinions are now in the public. So I was just a little worried about that. So I changed the format to just be sort of a structured. I answer a few questions that I find that allows Carl to then chunk up the stream into a few videos, and then they go live on YouTube and just kind of filter out, and so on and so forth. But it's okay. Like I've completely and utterly screwed up the stream by not sharing my screen. So that's absolutely fine. Let's just have a laugh. Let's have fun. Let's get people on and have a chat. I can see Dan can now talk, and then we'll just work out the rest later. Dan, go for it, mate. Yeah. Okay. I mean, look, I think that I think it's almost in the industry, it's almost accepted that you will make mistakes. Like I did a video recently, it's on a YouTube channel called "That Time I Deleted a Business." That was a video that was pulled out of one of the streams, and in that video I talk about how I literally deleted a business. There was an online website, sold games. It'd been with the company at the time, the hosting company, for about 8 years. It was literally 8 years worth of work, 8 years worth of graphics, 8 years worth of database. And Plesk, due to whether it was a bug or it was a behavior, but Plesk just said, "See you later," gone, boom, deleted. And it literally just removed everything off disk. It was like, "Oh, you want to make this change? Well, that's destructive. Didn't tell me that." Click, and off it went. And so then we had to scramble around for hours to find backups and get that website back up in time for a critical sale of a Call of Duty game. Hours before it was due to go live, and one of the biggest events for that website's essentially live. And even that, I'm still here. You can still do some pretty bad shit, and provided you learn from it and definitely don't do it again. And obviously, in that case, that wasn't technically my fault because I was being advised by a senior engineer to perform those actions. But even that didn't get me booted. And so I think even in the early days, you're expected to sort of be a hazard, a risk. Yeah. I can tell you another story as well. I'll try. It's obviously important that I don't think in names here, but I remember when I was at Rackspace, so that's the company, so a pretty big company, and we were all in a meeting, and when we were in a meeting, 1 or 2 engineers had to just stay at the desk to answer any phone calls that came through, a kind of rotation. And this individual was at the desk, and they had a task to do, which was something to do with a MySQL cluster. And they essentially did some work. The cluster went down. They shrugged, and they went for a cigarette. It was then the phone then was ringing quite a lot. One of the L3 engineers, the senior engineers, went out and answered the phone, and they were like, "Our cluster's down. Our entire website's down. What's going on?" It got to the point where this individual came back, and then the senior engineer was like, "You need to unlock your desktop so we can see. We need to fix this." When the junior engineer attempted to, sort of junior, not really junior, sort of L1, it's like level 1, level 2, principal kind of thing, The L1 engineer was doing such a bad job at trying to fix it that the senior engineer had to say, you need to just step away from the keyboard immediately. Like, this isn't like, we're not in the military here, but I'm just ordering you to move away from the keyboard because you are making this way worse than it is. Even that guy's still in IT. As scary as that sounds, even that person's still in IT. So once you're in, you're in. And to go back to the original sort of point of this is that I think certification in the very, very early days, i.e. day 0, will definitely help. But it's not an absolute must-have. But I think it's just a piece of ammunition that will help you get in. I do want to come back and just answer ADV, because he did ask, I meant to ask, how would you prepare for the first DevOps position? So that's a good question. And I would say that prepping for that would involve essentially playing around with the technologies that are involved in DevOps, because even though I'm an advocate for DevOps being much more than just the technologies, essentially DevOps almost essentially has nothing to do with actual tools and technology. It's actually to do with people and processes and communication and collaboration. And then there are just simply tools that fit that mentality really, really well. So in light of that, I would say that there are still tools you need to focus on. And I would pick a cloud provider. I would probably pick AWS just because of the sheer market share that they have. I would play around with the free tier. I would use tools like Terraform, Ansible, maybe even Salt, maybe even Chef or Puppet. I would be looking at setting up a website, and I would just be getting in there and getting my hands dirty. And then once you're comfortable, once you feel as though you're ready to start applying for work, you then want a good cover letter, a good CV that tries to speak to your experience as best as possible. And if you have no experience, but you do have a few jobs, you want to try and use those jobs. You want to use your CV to say how mature you were in those jobs and how your ability to learn and be flexible and be a team player and so keen to like change things and so on and so forth. You want your cover letter and your CV to speak to that. And then you want your portfolio piece, which is as much code as you can write, that builds things for you, writes software, builds an environment, builds infrastructure, and so on and so forth. You essentially want to get those things well aligned, and then you just want to start applying. It's essentially one of those situations where you've just got to do it. You just got to start, and you just got to start applying. You can't. You're never going to be. There's no perfect point where you go, now if I do this, I'm going to be absolutely able to get a job. It's simply not going to happen. You're going to have to start at some point applying and interviewing. And I would say that to get a small portfolio piece going, CV and cover letter. If you can get a certification, I would definitely say get a certification. Other than that, there's not much more else you can do. You just have to sort of keep going. You just have to sort of try. That's all you can do. That's all you can do. Link says, sometimes tech is too permissive with incompetence, in my opinion. I have met quite a few very incompetent engineers who shouldn't be working in tech. Yeah, there's a difference between forgiveness, learning, and absolute incompetence. Then again, if it's good enough for government work, yeah, I agree, Link. A friend of mine is a structural engineer, and he's a chartered engineer. And so that means that if he signs off on a bridge and the bridge collapses, guess who goes to prison? He does. And it's his insurance policy that then has to do all of the compensation. That is hardcore. That's like lawyers as well. Lawyers pass a bar, and then lawyers have to be, lawyers can't, technically can't lie, basically. They essentially have to be really, really good boys and girls. They have to really behave themselves, otherwise they lose that license. So do we need that sort of thing in IT? Well, this is a very interesting question, and I don't know whether or not we need that level of sort of charterhood or accountability. We sort of, like the Sarbanes-Oxley Act attempts to do that with financial regulation, sort of like if you are processing financial information and you have financial records, then they have to be kept for like 7 years at minimum, but no more than 7 years, and all this kind of stuff. And you can't just put all of your finances in electronic, in your sort of a database, and then when it's time for an audit, you can't just go, whoopsie, the database fell over and it's all gone. Oh well, you just have to take our word for it. You can't do that. Like that it used to be what people did, but you can't do that anymore. And so I would definitely. So Ninja said I have advocated having standards for engineering and tech and unionizing, and I agree with both those concepts. I think we need to have unionizing sounds really extreme, but all it really means is that pay is transparent and people aren't having the piss taken out of them. Conditions are good, but I mean, look, let's be honest, we are quite privileged in IT. Let's not sit down and make out that we're certainly suffering in any way with our free Coca-Cola and snacks, but and our high wages. But at the same time, we need to make sure that there's obviously set standard and a bar that employees have to meet. So I definitely agree with that, and I definitely agree that there should be a sort of almost like if you're dealing with infrastructure that deals within particular spaces like aerospace, health, education, and maybe government, then you have to be chartered. You have to meet a certain standard. However, private sector that doesn't address any of those sectors or doesn't have a value to the economy over, say, $100 million impact on the economy or something, can just freely innovate and just kind of do what they want. And if they fall over due to an outage, then oh well. It's like the night what was it called? Let me see if I can find it. It was the night investment. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, yeah. So it was Knight Capital servers had executed 4 million trades, losing the company $460 million in 45 minutes, placing it on the verge of bankruptcy. So essentially what had happened is, my understanding is, because they didn't have a DevOps process in place, when they then released new versions of the software, what essentially happened was one set of servers were updated one piece of software and the others just weren't even updated at all. And then they basically started trading each other. And they started just going bum, 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 bum. And essentially they lost $460 million in 45 minutes before Knight Capital, before anyone had even noticed. They didn't actually go under. They later did declare bankruptcy. Jesus, what company was that? Knight Capital. Yeah. Let me show you the link. Copy that link. Oh, sorry. It's a massive Google URL. My apologies. They didn't go under. I think they actually got bought. Someone actually came in and went yoink, because that's obviously an opportunity to go, let's not let that happen again. And also, you don't have any money. We have money. So someone swooped in, I think, and bought them really cheap. I think, anyway. Yeah, it was pretty nasty. And so that makes me think, do we need to have sort of a chartership system in systems engineering for the simple fact that if you don't, then what does a $440 million loss look like? And could it have been avoided if certain steps were taken? Like, should things like DevOps be mandatory? If you had a few senior engineers who were responsible for that release there, can they be held responsible? So on and so forth. Like we have that in law, right? We have that in finance. Like I'm a director of a business. If I dodge the books and I fiddle around with the books, which I don't, by the way, I don't do that. Then who's responsible? I'm responsible because I'm the director of the business. And so that's society saying that if you fiddle the books and your taxes, you go to prison. And so it should be a case of, if you're going to build a network that then has 450 million, that has billions of dollars going through it constantly, someone needs to be held responsible when that falls over, and it really drastically affects the economy. The incident was embarrassing for Knight CEO Thomas Joyce, who was an outspoken critic of Nasdaq's handling of Facebook's IPO. On the same day, the company's stock plunged 33%. By the next day, 75% of Knight's equity value had been erased. This reads like an Arrested Development, but it really does. It's like an episode of Arrested Development, right? Like Michael does something stupid, or Tobias does something stupid. Tobias walks into the office with just a pair of leather chaps on and the stock plunges 50%. I know a lot about the story since it has been used as an example of why formal verification in high frequency trading and non-aerospace high reliability is a good possibility. I have the worst lawyers. That is an example of, like, do we need regulation in the industry? And I honestly think that we do. I think that this is very clearly an example of why we do. Yeah. All right, so I've embarrassed myself with a really shit stream by not getting the screen going, so I do apologize for that. I did want to look at one more question, which I thought was very interesting. We've got about 15 minutes left before I need to jump off. So these streams are going to run for an hour, even on a Sunday one. I think I'm just going to run for 1 hour, and then we'll have a board of ideas, stories that I'm going to cover. I'm going to put them on the canny. That's a feedback.learndevops.com.au. Let me just put that in there for you. Feedback.learndevops.com.au. If you guys just check that out for me, that's actually somewhere you can go to, and you can actually come into here, streams, YouTube content. If you come into here, you can create a post and say, I would like you to cover this. I would like you to cover that. This would really help me out if you guys could do that, because it would give me everything I need in order to start producing content that you specifically want to see. So, for example, I've got a huge list here. I won't bring it up on the stream, but I've got a huge list of videos here. I've got 20 so far that are ideas for videos that I want to put in there. So I might add them and put them in here for you so you can see. But for the time being, let me just get this covered here, because I think that this is actually a really, really good question. It's the mental aspects of DevOps. I think they mean mental health rather than, like, I think you do have to be mental to work in DevOps, as in mental, as in crazy. However, it is fun. So whilst a lot has already been said about the technical skills needed, I don't think many have spoken about the mental aspect, and I think this is important for people thinking of moving into a career in DevOps. Having started doing this about 15 years ago, before it was even called DevOps, this is my personal experience. In short, DevOps in general is a mentally draining, very lonely and thankless job. The technical challenges are hard. It can be satisfying as a large majority of your work at less than one sprint, and you get to see the results straight away. It's very independent and has a lot of freedom. You get to play with every aspect of the SDLC. I think that, in my experience, in short, DevOps in general is a mentally draining, very lonely and thankless job. So I would say that mentally draining, very lonely and thankless ultimately has really nothing to do with the actual job of DevOps. I think that has to do with the culture that you're working in. Like, if you're mentally drained all the time to the point where you're exhausted, then you're either working too much, not sticking to your 9 to 5, not disconnecting from work when you leave work. I think if you're very lonely, that's a difficult one to answer, but I think that that's possibly you're on a very small team and you're really not doing DevOps. If I'm being honest, like, if you're very lonely, then you're not doing DevOps, because that implies silos, and DevOps is literally about the opposite of silos. You should be communicating with everyone within your organization to go from ideation to delivery. So it shouldn't be lonely if you're doing DevOps. And thankless just sounds like a really crap culture. I did a video on this recently called Praise the DevOps, which I believe is now live. And that talks about how, yeah, you definitely should be praising everyone in the organization for their good work. That's just emotional and psychological well-being. So these three things here actually they actually concern me, and they actually say to me that that's possibly a cultural problem. Ninja says, I want to add, another thing is that if you're mentally exhausted, you may be outside of your comfort zone for what you're trying to do. That's a good point, actually. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Have you stretched yourself too far? Maybe you've said, I can do this, to your boss, who's gone, okay, and they've given you the job. And then obviously your boss, she's now expecting you to get the job done. And then you're sat there going, oh God, this is way more than I expected. And I'm just fatigued by this. In which case you need to just be honest and put your hand up and say, I'm not capable of this. It's better to realize as early on as possible with being honest with what you're capable of, so you can find a balance of happiness with work and happiness with productivity and mental health. Perfect. Yeah, absolutely correct. Fully agree. You need to understand what you're capable of doing. But I would say understand what you're capable of doing, and then maybe just go forward a step and go, I'm going to push myself. I can do this, but I'm always going to push myself. I think that a little bit of healthy pain is good. I think a little bit of healthy pain is a form of growth, I think. That worries me straight away. So in loneliness, I want to see what he means, or sorry, I should say what they mean by loneliness. Most companies will only have a few DevOps engineers, and they are often working separately. No, spread between multiple applications and teams with only a few parts touching. Maybe that's sort of like an embedded DevOps within a, okay, I guess it depends on company. Well, like I said, it depends on the culture, right? Depends on the role, depends on the culture. Like same AWS account or same Jenkins instance. Even as a junior, you will probably follow a senior who supports X amount of apps, and after a while, you'll be expected to support one or two individually. Maybe. Again, I think that this, to me, sounds like that DevOps isn't really being understood and utilized properly here, because ultimately DevOps is about breaking down these silos, such as you're working separately. You shouldn't be working separately. Spread between multiple applications and teams with only a few parts touching. Or rather, as a junior, follow a senior who looks after X amount of apps, and after a while, you'll be expected to support one or two individually. I disagree. All of those apps, regardless of the technologies being used, should be going through the same DevOps processes. You should be going through the exact same processes of how do we automate this? How are you deploying this? How do we test it for you? How do we run those tests? What are the tests written in? Do we need a Linux CI runner or do we need a Windows CI runner? They should all be essentially one big pool that a team, and if you have a team of DevOps, that's fine. People who specialize in the automation side of the DevOps cycle is fine, but they shouldn't be in isolation. That's the opposite of DevOps. This is because it's very hard for another DevOps engineer to jump into someone else's project and help because of the different tech stack, the team members involved, where they're on a sprint, past issues, design decisions, even simple things like what's the repo code and where it's at. See, because of different tech stacks. So what I would say there is if you're in an organization that has 10 applications and they're all written with completely different dev stacks, that's fine. That makes sense. That can happen if Java's the right language for a particular application versus Go for another, versus JavaScript and Node.js for another. Fine. I don't personally have any issues with that. However, I think that the tech stack is almost, let's be honest, DevOps as a job is generally the far right of it, which is the operations side, let's be honest. And so given that that's the current trend, really the tech stack is mostly irrelevant. You sort of need to understand how you test, compile, and build an artifact. And that's kind of the limit of what your understanding needs to be. You don't have to know Java. You have to know the language inside out. You just need to know how to take what's being given in a pipeline and produce some kind of artifact. How do you test it and how do you package it, put it in a repository? And then the rest is essentially up to you at that point with feedback from everyone else. So I think that from a DevOps perspective, a team should just be across the board. If a new stack comes along, it's a completely different language. Everyone should just be getting their fingers into that because it should be possible for anyone in that team to support that stack. So I think this loneliness aspect is coming out of poor culture and poor organization. Okay, so thankless. Part of your job is to prepare for the worst and be able to recover quickly. Part of your job is to prepare for the worst and be able to recover quickly. And you need to streamline everything and remove as much manual duplicated stuff as possible. Yeah, okay. Which means a lot of DevOps is about doing the right thing, but these right things aren't seen and you won't get any recognition or thanks for it. I.e. rewriting all the configs to use a shared config instead of 100 individual build files. No one cares. Okay. I would say that if you don't have a culture of visibility and praise, I think that you need to make your shit visible. I agree, Ninja. Yeah, I think that if you're not in a situation where your work is visible, then first of all, you're not doing DevOps. You're not doing DevOps in that culture because everyone should be able to see what everyone is doing. It's meant to be a completely visible end-to-end pipeline. So that's bad straight away. If you're doing something and it's going unnoticed, that's because you're not doing retrospectives. That's because no one in management is looking and going, how are our staff doing? What are their achievements? And so on and so forth. Simply because if management are looking down and going, we're meeting our OKRs, our KPIs, that was an awesome thing that Jeff did. I can't believe Michelle managed to pull that off in such a small, that's amazing. Oh, I see that these config files have gone from 100 files down to 1 or 2 shared files, which has drastically improved the velocity of pipelines and so on and so forth. If management and your leader and so on and so forth aren't actively highlighting these wins and praising people, you're in a really shit environment, quite frankly. I'm not saying that every time I push some code that fixes a small problem, I don't want my manager to come running over to my desk and be like, I'm firing off a popper and being like, well done, that was amazing. Like, no, don't be condescending. But I think that if I've done 2 weeks worth of sprint and I've solved some problems, that should be visible to everyone. Everyone should know that. And we should all know what each other's doing. Yeah, okay. This post is full of issues, I think. I'm going to come back in the chat a little bit. I would never tell someone what they can't do, or what they are or are not capable of, because I am not an authority on anyone but myself. But I think it's important to discover this on a per individual basis, to be honest with yourself. Yeah, I think that you're going back to the, I'm rereading the sort of, the loneliness side of it, aren't I? There, you need to make your shit visible. You need to be your own advocate. If you don't have an advocate, you have to advocate for yourself and your work. Yeah, like if your leader isn't doing this for you, then you almost need to. I mean, and sounds like I'm suggesting that you go to war with your leader, but you almost need to become the leader. Like, I'm not talking about, like, we're not in a wolf pack here. I'm not saying that, you need to rip out your leader's throat and take him like, I said dominance. I don't think you need to do that. I just think you need to be like, well, if you're not going to praise me, then I'm going to let everyone else know that I've achieved these things. And so that is a little bit on you. Dan's on with Ninja on that one. I'm with Ninja on that one as well. Let's have a look, basically. So it's not best practice, common mistakes. Code smells are an anti-pattern of programming, right? Let's have a look. This comment about advocating hits home quite a bit. So have you had experience with that, Adrian? So have you found that you've been in an environment that really lacks advocation and stuff like that? Code smell. Well, what do you mean by code smells? Yeah, code smells technical debt, essentially. It basically means like anti-patterns in programming, technical debt. It's sort of like if you do something that's like an anti-pattern in programming, it gets smellier and worse as you leave it, and the software becomes more complex and you don't solve that problem. It essentially becomes worse further down the line. It like rots, essentially. I am going through it right now. Are you able to talk more to that, Adrian? Useful. No, it didn't get buried link. This may be too vague, broad, but would it be useful for me? Could you cover best practices? No, that won't get cut. I'll come back to that link. Don't worry. I'll make sure that that gets covered. But again, if you could put it at feedback.learndevops.com.au for me, that's really, really simple. I think you do need to sign in with something, but I don't see your details. I don't see like your email or anything. You're not being tricked into giving me your email. Don't worry about that. So code smells are indicators that there might be issues with code quality, akin to why Van Halen put requirements of a bowl of green M&Ms somewhere in the middle of their contracts with concert venues. Interesting. So yeah, code smell is it's about quality. So that code smell is testing is meant to be one of those things that attempts to remove code smell, as well as regressions and things. But code smell essentially boils down to like hacky crap that you've put in your code to get something done, and then you just leave it. It's that classic, let's just do this, it's only temporary. Let's be honest, you've just gaffer taped the wing on the side of the plane. If it works now, do you really think management are going to let you change it later? No, because it works. So yeah, code smell is the same in code. If you try and do something temporary in the code, it's not temporary at all. That thing is sticking around forever. Absolutely sticking around forever. Let's have a look. I think I've heard the Van Halen story, but I'm not super familiar with it. The one post of code smell that I can relate to is this. It does a good job. Clean and tidy. I think we've covered this pretty well. Yeah, this post, I might come back to this and do a professional video on this. Like I said, I've rightly screwed up this stream, so I do apologize for that. So this stream probably won't go live, or maybe it will. I just have to put an apology at the beginning. But I really want to address this one. I think this is more than a stream question. I think that this one is going to have to be an actual video. So I'm going to just go in here. Let's go in progress here. Yeah, I'm going to have to move this one into being a video, because I think that this one needs to be. I'm really worried about some of the things that they've mentioned in there, because it comes across as their culture is really crap that they're in. Time for a new job, I think. Okay, they put it in their contract to not have specific M&M colors in a bowl, so they knew the contract was actually red. Ah, I see. So it was a canary. So it was a canary in the contract, sort of. I've dealt with venues artists like that before. When I was doing live event industry, Phil Collins requested a specific SSID, so all of their devices connect automatically. That's pretty clever. So they just walk in, and then the devices go click. Yeah, so they don't have to sit there configuring their phone. Pretty funny. Yeah, that's pretty clever. So it's like a canary in there. Yeah, look, I don't think that's not sort of. I don't think that fits the code smell sort of definition, because that's more of a making sure someone has read a contract, or in the sense of like the sort of terms and conditions canaries, making sure, oh, we can't tell you that we got a FISA warrant, but if this line disappears, we're telling you we got a FISA warrant. That's that kind of thing. With code smell, it's more a case of you try and avoid doing hacky crap inside of your code. You kind of go, okay, well, look, you need to take this input. Just take the input. Just take the input. And just do a quick, don't check it. Just put it in the database. It'll be fine. We'll come back and we'll do input sanitation later. No, you won't. You definitely won't. You'll move on to the next task, and then you're done. That will never ever see the light of day until, of course, you get hacked. Sorry, Dan. That's a really good example. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And even AWS fall foul of this. They for like a bit. In fact, I'll give you a real world example from just about a week ago actually. When you use the Botto library to what was I doing? When you use the Botto library to create a ACM certificate, you get back a JSON document that contains a top level key, which is certificate ARN, and you get the ARN. But then when you use that ARN and you use describe certificate, you get back a document that then has a top level key of certificate, and then that's another document that then has at the top of that certificate ARN. And so they're two different things. So we had to do a bit of hacky cheekiness in order to get the loop that we needed to then do on the describe, waiting for it to become available. We had to then do a bit of cheekiness around that structure, because they didn't just keep the structure the same. They could have just given us a JSON document that had certificate with a document inside of it, and then a certificate ARN with the certificate ARN, and that could have been all it is, because every other then describe and everything else we then do with that API is then going to give us that exact same structure back. But that one difference in the create structure one meant that we have to work around that. That's an example of code smell. What Dan's saying there is, if you're hitting one API and it expects a variable name of CloudFront underscore ARN uppercase, but then the next one is CloudFront underscore ARN lowercase, or no underscore, or camel case, it's an example of code smell. It's basically people aren't reviewing each other's code and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's a really good example. It's a really good example. Do we have any other comments or any other questions? Just because my time is up and I have to go offline soon. But I love you guys and I want to answer your questions if I can. So ask away quickly. Type. Not a problem if you don't. Obviously, I'm on the Discord all the time, as you know. I do sleep, I promise, but I'm on the Discord all the time. So if you have any questions later on, there's a relevant channel. If it's relevant to the stream or something we've said on the stream, there's the questions there, and so on and so forth. But yeah, no, it's been good. What I can do is, no, I won't do that. If you all want to pop into the casual room after this, and then you can carry on the conversation there, you can all be able to talk. You've got Ninja around who's got permission to adjust people. So you've got Stub and Texan as well who can also do that. So I'm going to go off. I'm going to go offline. Thanks so much for attending today. Sorry about the screw at the beginning. I'll take these questions and I'll record them as proper videos so that they actually make it to YouTube for later reference, because I know that that's potentially useful for when we get these questions again in the future. All right, everyone. So, okay, it looks like no one else has any questions for me directly. So thanks very much for showing up. Really, really appreciate that. And I will see you around. Goodbye. Very nice.